Good morning, Turks and Caicos. Welcome to First Edition. I'm your host, Cheryl Forman. Now, my guest this morning is going to tell us all about her role, the reaction of the public, the benefits. Take a guess at who she is. She is the former Director of Social Welfare, and she's going to tell me the new name soon, but she is Ashley Adams, the Director of Family and Children's Services. Ms. Adams, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's start on a personal note. What drew you to this field, this whole field of social work?
So about 15 to 20 years ago, I was trying to figure out, I was coming out of high school and I was trying to figure out what exactly it was that I wanted to do with my life. I know I wanted to enter a helping profession. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and then I wanted to do nursing, and then I was interested or intrigued by mental health, and then I kind of it fell into my lap. I met a social worker and through college, and they were telling me about their experience, what the field is and what it is about and everything, and I did some research, and then I was like, okay, this seems really interesting. And then in my junior year of college, I had an internship with the Administration for Children's Services in New York City. And from that, I actually landed a job, but it was the best internship I possibly ever had. I think at that point I realized, like, child welfare, that was my thing. That was what I wanted to do in my life. That was where I wanted to dedicate my professional career. It was everything for me. And so I went hard into social work, and I got my master's in social work, and I got other specializations in different areas when it came to social work, and specifically child safeguarding and welfare services, and just basically trying to really help my community understand what it takes to be more strategic in our thinking when it comes to putting together resources, benefits for persons or impoverished people, and helping my community. I think I have a naturally helping heart. I always want to give, and I always want to provide, and wherever or whenever it's possible for me to help, I do that. And so I think that this job, even when I returned to Turks and Caicos Islands and I became the Deputy Director of Social Development, it has always been where I wanted to be. I tried to escape for a short period of time. I tried to escape for about a year. That didn't work. That didn't work. I think God strategically placed me where I'm at today. He was
calling you back.
He called me back. He was like, girl, come on back. That other stuff is not for you. This is where you belong. This is where your people need you most, and you're the perfect person for this position in this time, in this moment. And it kind of bounced, it flourished from there.
Now they say, once you love what you do and you're passionate about it, it doesn't become a job anymore.
Right.
And so it seems like you're really passionate about it, so you must enjoy it.
I love it with every inch of my heart. I think I could not see myself not being a social worker. I cannot. And I cannot see myself not working amongst children or working with children and families. That is my heart. I always tell people, especially when I do speeches or I go into forums and so forth, I tell them, two people have my heart, especially when it comes to this work. One is my foster parents, because they take on a responsibility that is not theirs, and the level of gratitude and appreciation that I have for foster parents is unwavering. And the second group of persons are bio parents. I never judge bio parents. I believe parenting is a facet of what our lived experiences. So parents only know how to parent the best that they have been parented. And so for me, it's always going to be about the parents. It's always going to be about strengthening family units, because I strongly believe a strong family builds resilient children. And I think that the answer to all of our societal ills, and I say it all the time, begins in the home. The home. And I push that narrative everywhere I go, whether I'm in a meeting, whether I'm doing a panel discussion, whether I'm in a forum. It begins at home. It takes us back to charity begins at home and ends abroad.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Ashley Adams, the Director of Family and Children's Services. Now that we have this new title, and Greg and I were trying to get used to it a while ago, tell us about the department. I understand now it's been divided.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about the split and what it means.
So let me take you back about 10 to 12 years ago. It was first the Department of Social Development and Gender Affairs. Well, about 30 years ago, it was just a probation and parole department. It expanded since then. It became social services, social welfare. About 2012, social development and gender affairs. Gender affairs divorced us in 2016. So it was always the plan to specialize this department, to pool resources where they're needed most. So gender affairs, which takes care of the domestic disputes, domestic violence, and trying to empower men and women alike, or at least gender equality, they split from us in 2016. So next on the agenda now was probation and parole. Let's try to get them split from us, right? Because the one thing we don't want to do, and this was what was happening about 10 years ago, is that all the social workers, and it was very small, it was like a few of us back then, were generalist practitioners. They were doing a little of everything under the belt that you could think of. So of course, resources were thin. People became burnt out. People became overwhelmed and tired. And so when the next on the agenda was probation and parole split, when probation and parole split from us, I think it was 2023, about 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago now. It was like, okay, next one off the list, go on, perfect. Probation and Parole Department is now renamed the Department of Rehabilitation and Community Supervision. That is under the directorship of Mr. Jerron Harvey. Excellent, he's doing his thing. He's, building up the department, seeing the vision, everything that we want, right? That we always want and discuss. And then from them, like, okay, next is family and children. We got to get the split, because family and children deserves its unique, own specialized skill set. And it is. Everywhere in the world, you have a department that's catered specifically to family and children services. Whether they call it children and family services, or even in where I was trained in New York City, they have specialized departments for families and then a specialized department for children. So they've even gone further by separating the two, right? And amongst our Caribbean region, all territories have a Department of Children and Family Services. And so I was telling my staff, and I would tell people that we are literally the last territory to do this. And I was specific with the naming of this department, where other regions have Department of Children and Family Services. I told the team, no, it has to be Department of Family and Children Services, because families must come first. The family unit is the strongest unit in our communities. You have strong families, you have strong communities, you have a strong nation. And strong families, whether that's a single parent family or two-parent family or extended family, strong families build resilient children. And once we have resilient children, that is the backbone. That's the answer to our societal ills. That's the answer to the crime problem that we're having. That's the answer to the probation problems that we're having. That's the answer to the police problems, the judiciary problems. It's the answer to everything. And so when I kind of got the ear of the government, like, listen, we need to invest in our families and our children. And I could promise you, in 10 to 20 years from now, you will see the benefits of that investment. I was like, we got to roll with it. We got to go hard with it. We got to do everything that we possibly can right now in this moment to ensure this department not only flourishes, but it meets the mandate and goals that I firmly believe we are capable of getting to.
That's awesome.
So with that being said, honestly, it has been to two departments though. So we have the Department of Family and Children Services, the Department of Community Support and Engagement. So community support and engagement is it's more focused on community. So it's more focused on community programming, building up our community units. So what our communities look like. Also, poverty alleviation is a big component of community support and engagement. The welfare programming that this department once had is now followed by community support and engagement, and that's important because we want to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the disenfranchised, the most vulnerable, those persons who are impoverished, not because they choose to, but because they're literally living in poor environments, trying to re-socialize them and re-educate them on what a quality of life looks like, right? And that takes specific programming, that takes specific staff members and team members literally looking into the work that we're doing with our communities and how we're going to alleviate poverty, or at the very least reduce the poverty amongst the Turks and Caicos Islands. And with that as well, in that department we look at disaster management. So how do we face man-made and natural disasters and challenges, because people can be vulnerable, may not be vulnerable prior to a natural disaster, or man-made disaster, but they become vulnerable right after, right? So how we're ensuring that the resources that we have for that department are reaching the persons that it needs to reach. And so with this split, this was the last of social development and gender affairs, or social development and welfare engagements. This is the last of the department's split. And so we have 4 different units that caters directly towards families, children, and communities. So we have our gender affairs, we have rehabilitation and community supervision, Department of Family and Children Services, and Department of Community Support and Engagement. So I made a joke with the director for DRCS rehabilitation the other day, and I said to him, man, gender affairs need to come on this block, because this is the family block. the block downtown in Butterfield Square next to LaBelle's. I said, this is the family block. We're all right next to each other, so gender affairs just needs to enter here. So when the families come in, they don't have to go all about providentialities. They can get all their core services right on the same block.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I hope they listen. They hope they hear it.
So listen, you mentioned needs quite a bit. At least I heard it twice at least, or maybe 3 times. So let's talk about that. How does the department define need in this modern socioeconomic context here in TCI?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because need is very subjective, right? People who go through hardships, that's very subjective to a person. So what I might quote unquote define as a hardship, you might not, right? And for us, we have evidence-based assessments, and I always tell persons, like, we don't go off of hearsay, we don't go off of what people believe hardship look like. We actually go in, we do our assessments. You first come to the department, you do an intake with our intake officer. What is the current circumstances, the presenting problem we're going to look at, and see how can we help you, what programs are there to help you through this moment, right? And then from there, that gets allocated to our actual social worker. The social worker will go out into the field, so we do a lot of home visits. People tend to not like home visits a lot. People tend to not like home visits. I think they think of it as like an invasion. You know, people, especially persons who come to us in their most vulnerable moments, they're like, I don't want people to see me living like how I live. And it's always onus on us as social workers to make sure that they see us as people, that we're not coming to judge you, we're not coming to do anything that suggests that we don't have any care for what you're going through in this moment, right? Home visits are specific, and I want to tell the public that they're specific to substantiate the evidence that you're presenting to us. So if you're saying to us you are hungry, or you don't have a bed, or your place is deteriorating and you need assistance because you need to build a bathroom for your children to properly shower and so forth, or you need to partition a room or something like that, we need to be able to see that. Because it's simple. It's the same as if you were to present evidence in court and you gave a statement, you did a police statement, the judge took the police statement, but it's different when the judge can hear from you testifying, right? That's first-hand evidence. And so our social workers go just to look at the environment, just to substantiate exactly what you're saying to us, that this is the hardship you're going through. So our assessments look at the presenting problem, any background factors. We do a financial means assessment, so what's your income versus your expenditure, and with the income, we look at any salaries, we look at any apartments, or any type of assets you might have, NIS, etc., right? Versus what you spend. Now, we are in the process of revising that policy, because the policy did say it was like a $600 threshold that persons, and this was back in 2016, 2017. So we're about like 7 years ahead, now 8 years ahead. Back then, it was presumed that persons were capable of living off at least $600 per month, or to meet their basic needs, right? We know that inflation is through the roof, especially in Turks and Caicos Islands. We know that that is not true right now. So what we do is we look at the means assessment. What is left over after you've done your expenses versus your income, right? And is this possible enough for you to be comfortable to live, or are you at the bare minimum where you might need little extra assistance here or there? Because we have identified a group called the working poor. So the working poor are individuals that actually work, but they're still poor. They literally only work to pay bills. I cannot tell you the number of families across the Turks and Caicos Islands that are experiencing the working poor conditions right now. They work, they can pay their rent, they can order their mortgage, they can pay their utilities, they might be able to pay transport here or there, but money runs out throughout the month for groceries. or they might have some sort of unexpected expense. Their car might broke down and then they have to go to a mechanic or something like that, or a child, God forbid, or someone in family falls ill and they might have to spend something on that, right? And so we have that group where they're literally working paycheck to paycheck. They're just like, they have that last week of the month where they're like, okay, I got to try and make this $20 stretch or something like that, right? Until payday. And so we've identified that group, and we're trying to, the new policy strategically looks at how do we address those needs to make sure that our people are not experiencing poverty in this country, that our people are being taken care of, that the government has all of the knowledge and information so that they can understand why we are requesting additional resources to meet the needs of those people. So the needs that we look at are based on the assessment that we do. And from the assessment, the social worker will do a recommendation, an evaluation, and then a recommendation. And they will say in their recommendation, they will do a recommendation to the senior social worker, who will either endorse it or nay, or just change it up. Then it goes to the deputy director and the director. And it'll basically say that I endorse a one-time grant. Maybe their one-time grant might be more beneficial in this moment because what they're experiencing is like a temporary hardship. So it might be a back payment on utilities, so outstanding utility bill of like $5,000 or something like that. They're looking at for turning off their lights or so forth, or it might be where they might be evicted soon because they haven't paid rent in such a long period of time, and we look at the cost of why you did this, right, and so forth. And so we might just want to give you a one-time grant as opposed to enrolling you onto the program. Or maybe you require being enrolled onto the program because you need the services, and it's going to be a longer period of time that the service is being needed at that time. So we look at the priority needs, and we try to address those priority needs as they come and as they present themselves through our assessment. So everything that we do, and I push this to the team all the time, it's always going to be evidence-based. It's never going to be what we think, because people sometimes have this notion that they believe. I had a client contacted me and tell me the other day, kind of broke my heart, because she said to me, you know, when I come to your department, I put a bonnet on my head because I don't want people to think that because my hair is done, I don't need your service, right? And it kind of it gave me a little quiver, because it was like, you know, I hope that, it is my hope that this department does not give anyone the opinion that we're here judging any circumstances that they're in. That's not our job. So our job is to be as compassionate as we possibly can. We lead with compassion, and that's something I've driven home to my team. We lead with compassion. We don't judge. I need the evidence. I need the assessments. Even when my team come to me, they're like, oh, Ms. Adams, I think we need, this person needs X, Y, and Z. I'll be like, where's the evidence? Show me the assessment, but do the review. I'm not just taking it like that, because I believe in evidence-based work, and that's one of our core principles of social work practice anyways, is that everything has to be grounded in evidence.
Listeners, viewers, if you're just joining us, tell a friend that Ashley Adams is educating us this morning on social needs and the benefits and the processes. Now, Ms. Adams, I've heard members of the public refer to the department as a handout agency, and you just mentioned all the needs that people have. Is that a fair perception? And if not, what are you doing to shift that perspective to make it more, you know, empowering and supportive for dignity?
Yes. So, great question. I absolutely despise when people call us a handout agency, or sometimes there's certain persons that would say that we're creating a welfare state. I despise that terminology. And I despise that terminology mostly because we have the smallest budget across the Caribbean, and I won't even begin to think of international countries when it comes to welfare programming. The smallest budget you could think of. The budget last financial year was $10 million, and $2 million was specific to salaries, $7 million was specific to programming. $7 million for 50,000 people is not nearly enough to cover the needs of this country. And I'll go before appropriations a lot, because I get that in appropriations, right? Which is that we're creating a welfare state. And so when I go before appropriations, I make sure to lay down a law. This is not a welfare state. We have the smallest budget across the Caribbean as it pertains to welfare programming, 1. 2, the last poverty assessment, which I participated in and spearheaded the participatory poverty assessment, indicated that 22% of residents in the Turks and Caicos Islands live in poverty. That's $1.66, well, at the time in 2020, $1.66 per day, right? Live in poverty. My program has 700 people to 50,000, literally 1.5% of this population. So I argue with them, we're not even making a dent as it pertains to poverty alleviation. Not even a dent. When 22% of your country lives in poverty, and my program can only meet the needs of 1.5% of that 22%, not even a dent in poverty alleviation. So no, we're not a handout agency. No, we're not a welfare state. I would argue that we're not even meeting the most important needs of the people that we live amongst within this country. And I tell people, prior to being a director, prior to being a deputy director, I was a frontline social worker. I have seen it, even in my capacities as the indirectorship, I still go out and do home visits firsthand. We have Turks and Caicos Islanders that live barrels of water. They don't have a cistern, they don't have running tap water. We have Turks and Caicos Islanders that don't have electricity inside their homes. They have battery operated lights where you could like push on and push off. I have Turks and Caicos Islanders that don't have meals in their home. When you go into their home, the cupboards are empty, the fridge are empty. They're literally living off of their children being fed at school through the school meals program, or sometimes coming to our department to say, hey, I need some food items right now, or I need a grocery voucher, or I need some sort of help in this area. I have Turks and Caicos Islanders who children unfortunately go to school, no uniforms, or the uniforms are unhygienic, or the uniforms are too old. Right? Shout out to my guidance counselors, because their offices tend to be that office that have the needs of everything. They have like iron boards and foods and all types of things, and their hair supplies just to comb girls' hair and things like that, right? Because the truth of the matter is, we are a very prideful nation, and a lot of persons, Turks and Caicos Islanders, they find it undignifying, like how you said earlier, right, to come into a department to say I need help. And it is my core hope that I change that narrative, so the persons know that when they come into this department, it is because the help is here for you, the service is here for you. I also want at the same time to also present education to persons as well, that need is subjective. You know, what you're going through at that moment might be temporary, and this is how we base our assessments. So it's not just to say that you come in and you say, hey, I need your service. You might need our service, but maybe it's a different type of service you need as opposed to the one that you want to come in and be enrolled on, right? So that's why we do our assessments, so that we can make an informed decision about the services that you need.
But I mean, just sitting here and listening to you, I didn't even realize myself that there were some Turks and Caicos Islanders at that point, because usually when we hear about that, we tend to attribute it to other nationalities within our societies, but not Turks and Caicos Islanders.
So I am also glad you brought up that point, because my programs are specific to Turks and Caicos Islanders. In order to be enrolled on my program, you have to be a Turks and Caicos Islander, and which means you have to present a belonging status card. We have some extenuating circumstances where we have some British Overseas Territory citizens on our program, so BOTC citizens who might have been born in Turks and Caicos and then got to the age of registration. So that happens. We do, and it's in extenuating circumstances. But the core facets of my program are 90% indigenous Turks and Caicos Islanders. So the program is specific to Turks and Caicos Islanders, and I hear that a lot. I hear people trying to tell me all the time who is on my program, right? People say, oh, you got this and you got that. I'm like, you don't know who on my program. you don't know. But I'll tell you this much, the programs are specific to Turks and Caicos Islanders, so if that kind of helps, to alleviate some concerns, yes. The one thing I will say is that the mandate of the department before, now that we split, we have different mandates now, but the mandate of the department is also to meet the needs of all children across the Turks and Caicos Islands, and that's irrespective of their citizenship, because they're children, they're minors. And we've ratified the UNCRC, which is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and so I have to meet the needs of every child across the Turks and Caicos Islands the best that I possibly can, and I do that. And we also have a number of stakeholders that help us a lot. Red Cross helps us a lot, Salvation Army we can tap into. I have some church food pantries that we tap into all the time, and so we find ways to meet people's needs.
All right.
But yes, Turks and Caicos Islanders.
Okay, let's lift our spirits a little bit after that depressing question. What about some success stories? Do you have any stories where people have moved from social assistance to self-sufficiency?
So that happens regularly. Some persons, when they come onto our program, they are enrolled temporarily. So we would say to them, like, they'll receive the letter and it says that you will receive assistance for the next 6 months. And this is just to help you during this period of hardship. And you are expected to go on to obtain employment and so forth. Our social workers sometimes help persons to obtain employment. I have a number of success stories I was talking to the team about, and I was like, man, we need to try to reach out to these persons to see if they would actually like come on national television and give, share their story if they're willing to, because it takes a lot to be vulnerable with this population especially, and see if they'd be willing to share their story so we can show people the successes that we've had, because that's twofold. With our families and persons that we've helped to kind of pull out of poverty, we've helped them obtain employment and got their job readiness skills, and we've gotten them into apartments, and now they have their children living with them, and we've been able to kind of strengthen that family unit. And then we also have some children that might have been in foster care of age out of care and have been very successful, very, very successful. Like when I think about the children, like names that come to my mind right now, it almost brings tears to my eyes, because I'm like, they had every order against them.
Yeah.
Every order against them, and they persevered, and they bloomed, and they're in adulthood, and they're just doing their thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. Let me just make note. What checks and balances are in place? I remember you just said, it has to be evidence-based, and your workers, your social officers have to go out and make sure that, what the applicant has said is actually the situation. So what checks and balances are in place to ensure that the application process is fair, confidential, and resistant to favoritism or political influence?
So when a person comes, a person could be, or a family or child could be referred to this department by any method. So someone could pick up the phone and call me to say X, Y, and Z. I'll send out a quick email, hey, this is going on, please go check this out. And the law allows us to intervene once we suspect that something might be occurring. So that's not just specific to safeguarding, that's also specific to if somebody makes a community report to say, hey, this person doesn't have electricity in their home, can you guys go check this out, or something like that, right? So sometimes people get, they're not sure what the law says that we're allowed to do. The law allows us to intervene because that's the mandate of this department. So we could get, a person could walk in as a self-referral, we could get a call-in referral, somebody can email, etc., right? So once a person comes into the department, they will meet with our intake officer. So the intake officer will do, it's like a pre-application basically. Basically it's a screening tool. And so what she does with the screening tool is that she would sit with our client, and I've told the intake officers, I want you guys to fill this out, because for a number of clients that come to our department, they might not be very literate, and so I don't like to shame clients. So I tell them, take on the responsibility one time. Just take it on. If they want to fill it out, they'll tell you, oh, I'm okay filling it out. Once they come in, just take on the responsibility of filling it out. Ask them the questions, bring them into the interview room, sit down, ask them the questions, fill it out. From the screening tool, they will determine what is the need that they would have came in for, right? Then it gets assigned to the social worker. The social worker, and I tell my social workers all the time, please go out in twos. As much as possible, go out in twos. There's a number of reasons for that, but a big one is for their safety. And we're office of all women. Men don't tend to join the social work field, at least not as often as we like, right? It is a nurturing field, and women by nature are nurturers. And so I tell them to go out in twos. They'll go to do their assessments and so forth. And when they come back, they'll just write down, they'll complete the assessment, they'll do their evaluation and recommendation. From that, it goes to the senior social worker, who would then peruse the application, make sure everything's intact, and the senior social worker will look at the evaluation and recommendation. They can either support the recommendation, or they can change the recommendation, or deny the recommendation altogether and say, hey, you need to go back out, and there's something you missed, you need to check this on that. From that, it goes to the deputy director, who again does the same thing, peruse, looks at the application processing, making sure that everything is okay, etc., whether or not she agrees, disagrees with the recommendation, or changes the recommendation. And then it comes to my desk. On my desk, I personally peruse every application that's given to me. Every application. And we have upwards of like 100 applications a month, or even more. Over the last number of years, our program has expanded tremendously. And in 2022, we had 151 persons on our program. In 2025, we have 700 persons.
Wow,
So
that's a
almost
big jump.
quadruple,
3 years, yeah.
almost quadruple the number
Yes.
that was previous just within the last 3 years, right? And it's specific to the expansion of social programming and meeting the needs of our communities. And I think that our government of the day, they're hearing it. They're hearing it, and they're actioning it, right? It's one thing to hear it, it's another thing to action it. They're actioning it. So from there, it comes to my desk. I personally peruse every application. I look at it and I make a determination whether or not I agree with the recommendations that are being put forth. I change the recommendation, or I go back down and I say, hey, you all need to check out X, Y, and Z, because I have not seen where this has been considered, right? And then we would give, from there, I do an approval listing. I send the approval listing to my administrative officer, because she's responsible for the payments and the vendor IDs, and then to my intake officer, who's responsible for drafting the approval or denial letters. And then from there, on the letter, there's a clause that says, should you wish to appeal this decision, you can write into our permanent secretary or deputy secretary for a decision to be appealed. And so the persons have an opportunity to appeal the decision if they do not agree with the reasoning for the service that they would have received. Yes. And from that, the deputy permanent secretary will come back down to say, we've received this appeal, or someone has written into us about something. Can you guys please provide us with information just so that we can look over it and fact check it, and then from there see whether or not, we agree with determination, or there should be a reconsideration. There has been, I could count maybe on one hand the amount of times persons have actually said, hey, I don't agree with your recommendation or something like that. By the time they go through the application process, they fully understand what we're looking at, and they fully understand the reasons behind the decisions that we make. Like, there are some persons that had asked for enrollment onto the program, and I would say to them, and sometimes I call persons up myself when the application comes on my desk, and I would say, I see you want a direct enrollment onto the program. I think that you should get a welfare grant, because I realize that the hardship you're facing right now is temporary. You're expected to obtain employment. You're an able-bodied, young, educated adult. You're expected to obtain employment. Or if you decide to work for yourself, you decide to work for yourself. But that's the other thing I would like to point out. Working for yourself does not mean enrollment onto social development or enrollment into community support and engagement. Sometimes self-employers, they tend to want the service from our department as a steady paycheck, but still want to do what they want to do in working for themselves. That is not meant to supplement you desiring to work for yourself, right? And if you're working for yourself, it's expected to actually pay into your NHIP scheme, because one of the things that this department does as well is cover medical coverage for Indigenous Turks and Caicos Islanders who might be bedridden, incapacitated, special needs, elderly, and have not made enough contributions to NIS, and they're not getting coverage through NIS, or they might have some sort of mental health challenge, right? Those are the persons that qualify for our NHIP scheme, because we know these persons will never be able to sustain employment. So they qualify. Not if you're self-employed. Self-employed individuals tend to always want to come to the department to ask for enrollment onto NHIP. It's, I think, $50 for a month for NHIP enrollment, and so we always encourage self-employed individuals, go and enroll yourself in NHIP. This program is not meant for this type of use, and so when we're doing our checks and balances, the public has the opportunity they also have the opportunity to request their entire application. They can request copies of everything that we have on file for them. It's their personal file. They have access to it. They can request the entire application file. And so when I tell my social workers all the time, you better write as if this could be subpoenaed to court, because people can have access to these documents. Don't think that they won't have access to these documents, because if somebody come in here and say, Miss Adams, I would like a copy of my record, I would literally say, go and make a copy of their record and hand it to them, please. They're entitled to it, right? It's their right. And so there's a number of checks and balances internally and externally as well.
Now, you mentioned your meager budget earlier. And you also mentioned that you tend to encourage your staff to go out in pairs. So what is your manpower base in the department, and how many qualified trained social workers do you have?
So the Department of Family and Children Services has 31 as manpower, and the Department of Community Support and Engagement has 10, right? Right now we have qualified 15 social workers, and these are social workers with bachelor degrees or higher. I have gone on this mission over the last year to ensure that anyone who comes to the department and anyone who's within the department is qualified. They meet specific requirements to be called social workers. I'm also in the process of working with my team to roll out our social work licensing requirement within the Turks and Caicos Islands. And so in other jurisdictions, you require a licensure to be called a social worker. And that licensure means that you would have gone through the requisite programmings to make sure that you had the minimum or the basic understanding of social work. It would have ensured that you would have done so many contact hours. So in New York State, where I was trained, I had to do at least 2,000 contact hours with individuals. It would have made sure that you had at least 100 supervision hours. So you were properly supervised during this course by someone who had an MSW or higher. And then it would have made sure that you are continuously educating yourself. And so that's the key. We want to always provide continuous education to our social workers to ensure that their skills are always up to date and up to par. Because in this field, at least, best practices are always changing. The evidence-based practices is always evolving, and we want to make sure that we're on par with our regional counterparts and our international counterparts. And I say to my team, I want one day Cayman Islands and Bermuda and Trinidad to say, hey, let's do what Turks and Caicos doing. Turks and Caicos doing something that looks, raising little eyebrows like, that look like it's working. Yeah, let's try, let's send somebody over to Turks and Caicos so we could see what they're doing and how they're working with their people, right? To strengthen their communities and their families. And that's my core mission, to make sure that we are so well respected across the Turks and Caicos Islands by virtue of our qualifications, by virtue of our experience, that people feel trusted. They can entrust us with the work that we're doing and know that we're doing it fair, we're doing it just, and we're doing it because we're properly qualified and credentialed to do it.
While like you, I feel for others, I think I'd spend all your money because I cry at sad movies and a sad song. But let me ask this: how do you manage burnout or compassion fatigue?
Compassion fatigue is a big one.
Because I can see it happening.
Compassion fatigue is a big one. Even I myself experience it a lot. Burnout and compassion fatigue, and I personally, I'll speak for me first. So I personally try my best to balance. And I notice when I'm experiencing burnout, when I start to slow down, I'll be like, actually, wait. And something you're doing right now that would take you like maybe 24 hours to do is taking you like 5 days to do. Or I might go to work sometimes, I sit behind my desk and I'm realizing that I didn't do anything meaningful today or productive today. I literally just sat behind my desk and just answered emails as opposed to actually doing work, right? And so I would look at that and say, oh God, okay, time for me to kind of do something to like reinvigorate myself or re-energize. Then that might be taking a walk on the beach or just taking a break from social or taking 2 days off or something like that. And then I'll look amongst my team members and I'll be like, yeah, you're all tired. You're all tired. Okay, so what you all want me to do right now? We'll have an in-house retreat. You need me to give you all buy some lunch or some pizza or something like that? Do we need just a day of us just being in here, not kind of engaging in too much work or anything? Do we need to quiet it down? Do you guys need to go on vacations? Do you need to take 2 days off? Or sometimes, and it's something that I hope that the government will consider moving forward. I know we talked about it at the leadership forum, the deputy governor had a couple weeks ago, which is that mental health days, right? And especially mental health days for helping professions, because it's a lot to service people day in and day out. And it takes a lot out of you, and ensuring that your mental health is properly healthy, like you're going through the emotions, you're processing the emotions, and you're able to support the persons that you need to support, only if you can do so with a healthy mindset. And I remember talking to my brother one time and I saying to him, man, I need a hobby. I said, I should come play tennis with you. And he was like, why you just don't go join Rotaract or Seroptimus or something like that? And I looked at him and I said, Avi, my job is service. I serve others day in and day out. I want something for me. And I need something for me in this moment. So while I'm not opposed to joining those organizations, if I'm looking for a hobby, it needs to be something to fill my cup. Because I can't pour from an empty cup. So I need to refill my cup. And the same with our social workers, the same with our team members, because our job is a job of service. That's what we do day in and day out.
Yeah. If if you had to defend the department in front of a room full of skeptics, and I heard you say earlier you have to make that justification sometime to the Public Accounts Committee, but if you had to justify your department to a room full of skeptics, what would be the single most compelling argument that you would make in relation to the importance of your department to the country?
So I say this all the time, right? People tend to tell me that when things go wrong, and things will go wrong, you know, it's not going to be perfect, especially when you're dealing with humans, when you're dealing with children and so forth. It's not. They tend to say the system failed. And I tend to tell them, well, the system begins with you. The system is not the corporate work that we do. The system begins with you. The system begins with the community member, the person that's got the eyes on the ground, who we rely on to say, this is happening, I need to take some sort of responsibility, or I need to like call up somebody because I'm uncomfortable with what I'm seeing happening, or I'm afraid about what I'm seeing happening, or whatever, right? So the system begins with the average person in the community who wants to see a change and who's going to bring it to the authorities to make that change. And so when they bring it to our doorstep now, our responsibility now is to handle this in the most strategic manner possible to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all persons involved, but also balancing community safety. So what does that look like? And so that's the work that we do. And I tell this to my honorable members all the time, like the work that we do is the core foundation of all of your problems. Literally the backbone to everything that's happening in Turks and Caicos Islands. This is how important the work that is that we do. And I want them to recognize that in our social workers, recognize that in the children that we work with, recognize this in the needs of the family that we meet, recognize this in our at-risk juveniles who need critical attention at the moment. Recognize this in everything, in all the facets of community life, because when you have strong communities, you have a strong nation, and I can't stress that enough. And so when I go before appropriation, sometimes, you know, they be like, I'm a little defensive or something like that, or I make sure give them enough information when I do my little speech so that when the questions come, you know, they would have been already answered, or the questions would have been, you know, minimized a bit. But I make sure to tell them, listen, this work is not lightweight. This work is serious work. And I want persons across the Turks and Caicos Islands to take it seriously. It's one of the reasons why we've gone hard on our education campaigns. It's one of the reasons why we're ensuring that we have quality support staff inside social development. It's one of the reasons why everybody's coming in credentialed. And I tell my social workers all the time, if you want this area of expertise, you go and get yourself qualified in this area of expertise, because I personally, as the director of this department, I'm not accepting anything less, because I want to ensure that when I'm doing my strategic work, amending legislations and putting policies in places and so forth, when you go out in the field and represent social development, you're representing social development to the best of your capabilities. I don't have to have community persons making reports to me saying, man, your social worker wasn't pleasant, or your social worker did this or so did that, right? And so it's important for me to ensure that I have the proper resources, not only to meet the needs of the community members, but also to meet the needs of my staff. Because the staff are the ones that are carrying out the jobs. And so I do that regularly. When I go before critics, I love the department. I love my job. So sometimes, you know, they might say I'm a little biased because I love my job. I love my department. People always tell me that, you know, I speak with a lot of passion when it comes to my work. But I try not to let my passion blind me, because I also know that it's not going to be perfect work. I also know that the complaints might come and the concerns might come, and I want the public to know that I'm here to hear it, and I want to address it as best as I possibly can address it. But to also give us a lot of grace. The work that we do is a lot. When my social workers go home at the end of the night, they go home to their families, and you know, I don't know what's happening behind closed doors and so forth, and they might have a lot that they're going through. So to please give us a lot of grace. The one thing I don't want to take from the work that we're doing is the humane aspect. You know, the humane aspect is always there. The work that we do is always going to be about humanity, and that's twofold. So not just for our community members, but also for the staff that work within the department.
So how you mentioned the communities. How does your department ensure service delivery across the islands, or is it fair to say there's a concentration of services in Providenciales?
So it is across the island. So all islands have access to the same services. In North Caicos, we have 2 station social workers that's supposed to meet the needs of North and Middle Caicos. At one point, we were considering to put an assistant social worker in Middle Caicos because there is a bit of a population. There's about 30 persons, mostly elderly. But we've also kind of used North and Middle Caicos as some of our safe havens sometimes. And then we have South Caicos, where we have a social worker and assistant social worker. So we have 2 persons in South Caicos. In Grand Turk, I have a team of, thinking in my head, sorry, my deputy director, the senior social worker, 5 social workers, and a psychiatric social worker. So we're looking to turn the psychiatric social worker into a clinical social worker now that we have shifted departments. So the Family and Children Services, a core aspect of that department is going to be strengthening families. And so we're looking to expand our clinical social work practices. And the clinical social work practices is specific to counseling and supportive therapy and bonding and support groups and bringing families together, bringing children together, trying to reduce the tensions between children and their parents and so forth, right? So we're looking to expand our clinical social work practice within that department. So in Grand Turk, I have about 9 persons at the main office, and then I have a staff of 9 at our Mahila Winds Empowerment Home. So that's our home for our at-risk girls that cater to at-risk girls across the Turks and Caicos Islands. Very small home, very small unit. So overall, about 18 staff members, 220 in Grand Turk. Provo has my largest staff. So the core MASH services, so I would say that the core MASH services, which is our multi-agency safeguarding hub, that is concentrated in Providenciales. So that's an office shared between our child protection social workers and the safeguarding and public protection police officers. And so the safeguarding social workers, we have 2, and I have a senior social worker that's attached to that unit. It is hopeful that with the split of the department, we'll get to expand that unit, and I could get some more child protection social workers and so forth, because there's a lot of safeguarding work to be done. And so with the aspect of us doing the frontline casework, we also are about to roll out the safeguarding licensing requirement. And the safeguarding licensing requirement is going to be for all businesses, all agencies that execute care towards children. Daycare centers, youth groups, Friday church groups, Christmas camps, summer camps, you name it. You're going to be required under our legislation to apply to this department for a safeguarding license once you have a minor within your premises, because it is important for you to understand your responsibilities to that minor once that minor enters your premises. And that safeguarding licensing requirement looks at the application process, and we train all of the staff members that are supposed to be within that youth camp, youth group, or whatever. We do an inspection to ensure that wherever the camp or the youth group is being held, it's safe for children. So we're looking at the physical capacity and so forth. We're looking at the adult to child ratio, and that changes based on age. And we're looking at whether or not you have a safeguarding policy in place. So the safeguarding policy is key. All agencies that operate care towards children must have a safeguarding policy. You must know what to do when things happen under your agency watch, right? And so that is going to be a core requirement that all agencies, schools, daycare, everything, they must have a safeguarding licensing requirement that's going to fall within our child protection social workers, and hopefully we're able to bring on a safeguarding licensing officer. And then I have our children in needs team. So the children in needs team is about 8 social workers at the moment. A senior social worker, and then I have, and that children needs team look at custody, guardianship, access, and then foster care. The biggest component of the work that we do in family and children services as well. And then also reunification, so bringing families back together, permanency planning for children. And then we have our community support and engagement team, so a small team that does our welfare benefits work, and then hopefully get a senior social worker attached to that team and the deputy director.
And that safeguarding at our minors is particularly foremost in our minds right now with the recent floods in Texas
Yes.
and the camps. I mean,
Yes, I saw
if
that.
we
It
haven't,
broke my heart.
Yeah,
It broke
it's
my heart.
really foremost in our minds right now. We just have a couple of minutes, and I remember off camera you were telling us about some events that you have coming up and kind of like an educational tour.
Yes.
Just quickly tell us about that.
So the departments are going on an educational tour over the month of July. So we do this throughout the summer months. It's our town hall meetings that we try to put out there during the month of July, because the month of July tends to be a slowdown month. People just come in, children are just graduating, people are either they're going on vacations or they're here until August for their vacations and so forth. So we use it as a month of opportunity to go on our town halls across the islands to talk about the work that we do. So these specific town halls now, we're going on to South Cape is on Thursday, Middle Cape is Monday, North Cape is Tuesday, Garatuck and Salt Key next Thursday, and then Providenciales will be the last week of July, and we're going across all the communities in Providenciales. And we're talking specific about the split of social development and welfare. We're talking about the new department, the Family of Children and Children's Services,
yeah.
and then the Department of Community Support and Engagement. And we're looking at, and we're hoping to educate you about the services that we do, our mission and vision statements, the work that's going to come out of this, and the reason for the split, which is perhaps the most important thing that persons want to know. Why split?
Yeah.
Right? And it's important for persons to understand this work right here that we're doing is a core function of the outcomes that we'll see in the next 10 to 20 years. And I am hoping to possibly engage some sort of consultant on a longitudinal study, because I just want to see the impact that God's willing if I live for the next 10 years or 20 years, or I'm still in Turks and Caicos Islands, that we could see the impact of the work that we're doing today on the children that we would have worked with during this time in the next 10 to 20 years. We're looking at early intervention. We're looking at opportunities to be preventative as opposed to reactive. We're looking at opportunities to amend behaviors amongst our juveniles right now that we deem at risk, who are bringing about community concerns. And we're looking at opportunities to strengthen families, so keeping our family units together as opposed to breaking them apart. I always say, at one point this department had the I guess stigma attached to it that we break families up, and I want to change that so bad. I hate when people say that my job is to strengthen the family unit, and as much as I possibly can, I do that, but I don't do that over the safety of a child. I will say that the safety of a child will always be present, and so if it's safer for a child to be removed in this present time, that will always happen. But where I can strengthen the family unit, I believe in strengthening the family unit. Strong families build resilient children, in turn build resilient communities and resilient nations.
Great. We need a whole nother hour to continue talking to Ms. Ashley Adams, the Director of Family and Children's Services. Thank you so much. It's been great. It was very informative. Come back soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for the work that you and your team do every day to ensuring and uplifting our families and ensuring that Turks and Caicos Islanders live with a certain degree of dignity.
Yes.
So thanks a lot for all that you do.
Thank you.
This has been First Edition. We've been talking to Ashley Adams, the Director of Family and Children's Services. We won't be here on Thursday as there's so many coinciding government events happening, but we'll see you next Tuesday. Until then, stay safe.